Hey everyone, it's Christy from Worldschool Chronicles. Today I wanted to talk about learning a new language and fitting in with a new culture that you may be exploring. So for the topic of fitting in with a new culture that you may be exploring, we like to keep our regular routines and traditions. So we still do, whatever we do for Christmas, whatever we do for Easter, birthdays, that kind of thing. But we also try to incorporate whatever the local tradition is. So if you're in a Latin country, for example, and let's say the local tradition is to do piñata for a birthday, we'll do a piñata and we'll do our traditions as well, kind of incorporate them together. And staying on your own routine really helps kids to adjust a little bit easier, and ourselves really. So if we, like for me, I have a 2-year-old and he has a nap every afternoon. So we still do the nap every afternoon. We try and do a walk every morning. We try and do the same thing for bedtime, just so that everything's the same. Makes it easier on them. And the other thing is it is cheaper to eat local food, but you should also be prepared to buy food that's common to you. I know when we first went overseas, it was hard for my kids sometimes with just eating rice and beans all the time. So we did buy, boxes of Kraft Dinner. We did buy Nutella. We did buy things that my kids found as a treat and really enjoyed. And it made adjusting a little bit easier, and it wasn't all that expensive. The other thing that we try and do is we try and immerse ourselves in the culture as much as possible. So we look around at, supermarkets and things like that for advertisements for festivals and things that are going on, and we try to go to those. And that really helps us to fit in, learn the culture. So we were in a Latin country during Carnival, and so part of our education was we went to the pharmacy and we bought plaster for casts, and we made masks with them, Carnival masks. So we made the Carnival masks, and then the kids wore them down to the parade, and we looked up the history of Carnival and what it meant. And so where we were, they had these, they looked like footballs, and they were on a string, and they would walk by and whack people with them. And so we wanted to know why they were doing that. So we researched that, and we found out that they were originally made out of goat's bladders, and it was to scare away bad demons. So that was kind of interesting, and that helped us to learn about the culture. So we kind of try and incorporate as many local festivals and things like that as we can. We also try and get to know as many of the local people as we can, because everybody comes from a different history, and they all have their own stories, they all have their own recipes, they all have their own things that they're good at. So I learned from one of the ladies that we lived close to, that because she had on her window, she had all these little balls, the seeds from inside the avocado. And I asked her what they were for, and she said, well, she dries them, and then she grinds up the seeds inside, and she makes medicine for her husband for his high blood pressure. So that was pretty interesting. And so we learned a lot from their culture of medicinal medicines and things like that from talking to locals and older locals. Another way to, so that's how we kind of fit into the culture and learn about the culture. And then to learn a new language, it's really difficult sometimes to be in a new culture and not speak the language. And we want to learn it as quickly as possible, but some of us have a hard time learning it. So a couple of good ways to learn before you leave are Duolingo is an app you can get for your phone, and you do about 15, you can do 5, 10, or 15, 20 minutes a day, depending on which level you pick. And there's all kinds of different languages that you can choose, and it's little games that you play, but you really learn quickly the basics. It's not an in-depth course, but it gives you the basics. Another way is you can go on buddyschool.com and you can look for a tutor in the language that you'd like to do. So you'll have to pay a little bit, but you get online Skype tutoring with a tutor, which has been helpful in some of the more difficult languages that I find difficult, like Asian languages and the Eastern European languages, my tongue just doesn't do what the language needs me to do. And so it's really difficult for me. So I found tutoring online to be really beneficial. The other thing you can do for the kids is often you can put learn whatever language for kids in on your iPad or your tablet, and you can find all kinds of apps for kids that are free or really cheap, like $2 or $3, and they teach them the language really quite easily. Sorry, there's a lot of mosquitoes here. And that's really worked well for my kids, and they're quite little and they absorb stuff really easily. Another thing that you can do is the city that we're from, Edmonton, is really multicultural, and so it's quite beneficial to us. So in the library, in the kids' library, they have all kinds of books that are side by side. So, and what that means is, so they'll have the story, and on each page it's in English or in Spanish, or English and Hungarian, or English and whatever language. And so that's beneficial to me because I'm learning to read that language as well as learning to speak it, which is really beneficial when you're going to the country because you're going to have to read stuff too. And so that's really helped me. And it is children's books, but sometimes they have it in adult books as well. And it's quite helpful. They're not really in-depth books, but they're enough that you understand. It's kind of like the highest level that they'll go to is probably grade 2 or grade 3, but it's good enough for me to learn the language and learn the grammar and all of that kind of stuff. Another thing that's worked really well for us is watching shows that we've seen before in that language. So when we were learning Spanish, my daughter was crazy about Twilight. So we got Twilight in Spanish and we watched it in Spanish. And if you can get it in that language with subtitles in English, that's really good because then you can kind of listen, but as well read and understand what you're watching. And the other thing for kids, so if you go on YouTube, you can find just about every little kids show in all kinds of languages, especially the older shows, you know, like Barney and Thomas and Bob the Builder and things like that. So you can put those on, and if they know what those are in English, it's really simple to put them on in a different language. And kids are really funny that way because they get the characters and they've probably seen that episode before, and so they know what's going on and they quickly catch on. And so those are ways that you can learn a new language either while you're traveling or while you're at home. And a really good thing to remember is that try and speak it as much as you can. So even if you think you sound hilarious and stupid and whatever, just keep trying. A friend of mine, I was really afraid to speak to her in Spanish because I didn't think my Spanish was good enough. And she said to me, she said, "Christy, your Spanish is much better than my English because I don't know any words in English. So we're okay." So it was nice because my Spanish was horrible, but she was happy that I was trying, and we really developed a really good friendship because of it, because we can kind of giggle about some of my mistakes, and she helps me with my Spanish and tells me, whoa, that's not it. That's not the way you say it. It's like this. And we've become really good friends because of that, you know. And so it's really helped my Spanish because I had no other choice but to speak Spanish to her. And so we've really taken that approach when we go traveling. So no matter where we are, when we're out in public, we try and speak the language as much as we can, you know. I mean, I could go into a supermarket and I could say, you know, I want this, but I always try my hardest to, you know, to say it in their language. And then if they have no idea what I'm talking about, they'll say in English, what do you want? And I'll say it. And then they'll say, oh, and they'll tell me in the language, and then I try it, you know, and then I have it. So that's the way you learn, is just to go out and do it. And expect to make some mistakes. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. So you don't have to be fluent in the language before you go, but it's nice to know a few phrases and things, nice things to say, you know. And it'll be different wherever you go. So if you're in a certain area of Mexico, their Spanish is different than, say, Dominican Republic or Spain, or, you know, everything's a little bit different. So, and that's okay. So if you, let's say, for example, I had a Spanish-English dictionary from here in Canada, which is more Mexican Spanish. And so I looked in we were renting this place and the sink was broken. And so I called the landlord and I said, as best as I could, I said that my sink was broken, and he had no idea what I was talking about. He said, I'll be over in 10 minutes. Okay. So he came over and he came to the door and he's like, what's the problem? And I'm like, my sink. And I'm telling him the word that I learned out of the Spanish dictionary, which is Spain Spanish. And he had no idea what I was talking about. And he's like, your what? And I'm like, my sink. And he was showing me. So I went into the bathroom and I showed him, and he goes, oh, lava mano, which is like wash hands. And I'm like, oh, well, that was easy, you know. So a lot of times the dictionary doesn't match the local dialect, and that's okay. And you kind of giggle and you learn from it. And some of our best stories are from our learning the language, you know. Some of our mistakes, you know, where, you know, we were mistakenly told that briquettes was hot dogs. And so we're going around asking for hot dogs when really we didn't want hot dogs, we wanted briquettes to barbecue chicken. And finally a friend brought me 84 hot dogs because I said I needed lots. And he brought them and I looked in the bag and I'm like, well, how am I going to cook chicken with this? And then he went, oh no, you don't want hot dogs, you want briquettes. So, and the mistakes often make the best stories. So all I'm trying to get at is try your best, learn as much as you can, but don't really stress over it, and it'll all work out. So enjoy.